In this lesson, we'll be building a simple game where we move around the screen with our little green character that you see here, and we can move left, right, up, and down. And we'll go around, and the objective is to pick up at least 4 of these coins, and that will allow for this door to disappear and let us drive through and go to the next level. Right now, when I demonstrate this, this door is blocking the exit. But the idea here is if we pick up 4 coins, in other words, move around and pick them up, this will fade away and disappear, and that will allow us to go through the exit. So let me just hit play and demonstrate how this works here. Oh, yes, of course, and very importantly, in this lesson, we're going to create a scorekeeper. So you can see a display of the score up here. Currently, we're at 0. Every time I pick up a coin, it will add 1 to the score. So really, you have to get 4 or more to allow yourself to go to the next level. So I'm just going to use my arrow keys. I've got left, right, up, and down. And you can combine, sort of thing, to go on an angle. And you see there, when I intersected with the coin, it quote, ate the coin. It really disappeared and initiated a sound, as well as adding 1 to the score. So that score information is actually being kept in a custom attribute that we will create inside of the movie. So you go around here and pick 4 of these guys. Okay, now watch this. It fades away, and then I can line myself up and drive through, and boom, we're on the next level. I just put a simple text element, but we're actually in a new scene right now. So the other thing we're going to do today is actually create a second scene and give ourselves the ability to jump to it. So I'm just going to start it all over again here. And we do have, of course, walls to contain our player, and a door. I call it a door or a gate here. And if I drive into that gate, you will see that it's not something that I can go through. It does get blocked, right? And the walls, of course, block as well. So 1 coin, 2 coins, 3 coins, 4 coins, and then the gate fades away. I've got it fading on 2 seconds. Maybe 1 second might be better, but the idea there is that it does fade away and not simply disappear. That's another new feature that we will learn how to do today as well. Okay, so the last step is I'll drive through the exit door here, and I'm now in the next level. Okay, so let's quickly go around and see how this was built. I'm on my scenes tab, and you can see I have initial scene, and the second scene I called win. And you can't see it, but there's a text box there, and it doesn't display unless we're in preview. Let me go back to my initial scene, and we have several actors here. We have the wall, the door, the coin, and the coin, I did use the animated sequenced images for that. Then our player, which is the green guy. The score, which is this text box here, which you can't see, but I can click on it. A threshold, which is an invisible wall, actually, that sits behind the gate. And that's the trigger, that, in fact, that on a collision with this invisible wall, when the player collides, it will launch a new scene. Let me just get rid of this here. So the threshold is actually an invisible wall behind the gate. And when my green player intersects this invisible block, if you will, that is the trigger. So when they collide, based on that collision, we will jump to a new scene. And that's literally the logic behind how it works. And then this is just another text box. I called it win initially. It says yay, next level when we get to it. And if I pull up my backstage, you can see that right here. And all the particulars for that text box. And that is on the other scene right here. And if I click here, that's that text box. Now you'll notice all my actors, though, regardless of how many scenes there are, the actors are all common for the movie. All right, so these are all common for the movie, but we can, of course, have different scenes. If I go to my assets, I've got my coins and my sound file. Okay, so that's the basics on how this was built here. Again, let me just pull this down, go to initial scene. And if I go to my actors tab, you can just see the wall is a red block. Happens to be, let me just go in my size here, happens to be 60 by 60 pixels. The door, now you can just stretch this door manually, but it happens to be let's see here, 50 by 158, and that weird number, that's because I manually stretched it. So that's what I ended up with. So whatever you do on the stage, it will be reflected in this information over here in your attributes. Okay, and with respect to the wall, let me just click on there again. On the physics, I believe we set the bounce to 0, bounciness 0, and uncheck movable. All right, so all the wall components, the wall elements should not be movable, and the bounciness should be set to 0, so that if and when the player collides with the wall, you won't have this vibrating bounce. It'll just kind of thud. Okay, and then basically the same thing for the not the threshold, but the door. So again, in physics, make sure that it's not movable. And you know what? I'm going to turn that bounciness down to 0 while I'm here. Just hit my enter key and save that quickly. Okay, but that's basically it, except for the code that we have attached to the player. So let me just quickly review that. I'll just drag this guy way up here. I've got 4 separate moves. These are very simple moves based on a key press condition, and it will just use the move behavior to send it in its appropriate direction at an appropriate speed. So I'm moving them all at the speed of 300, and if you recall, left horizontally is 180 degrees, right is 0 degrees. If I open that up there, I'm just going to collapse and open as I go here. Up is 90 degrees, or rather down is 270, up is 90 degrees. I just didn't click on it there. It's associated with all the 4 arrow keys, so that's the down key, and the up key, let me just go up here, is 90 degrees as I mentioned, and it's attached to the up key on the keyboard. So those are your 4 very basic movements that you can create with the red player. I do have a collide for the walls and a collide for the door. Really, that's all there is attached to the player. The rest of the code would be in with the coins. If I click on coin here, so we've got some animate. And on collision with the player, we have a destroy, which means it will disappear. And we also will be playing a sound. And then if I go down a little further, I've got a custom attribute called score. And it's not associated with the actor, it's actually associated with the game. But let me just show you in the dialog box here, we've got set game score to game score plus 1. And I'll show you the syntax or the method to do that when I demonstrate it. But what we're doing is we're taking this custom attribute that we've set up in the game. Let me just go over here and show you that. In game, I went add attribute, and I made it an integer, and I called it score, and it's just down here at the bottom here, score. And it defaulted to a value of 0, so when the game starts, the score value is 0. Every time we go around and collide with a coin, and the coin disappears and makes a noise, and it also adds 1 to the value of that custom attribute, which is inside the game tab. Okay, so that's how we keep score, and then we need to display that information. So this is kind of in the brain, and it's keeping track of the score, and it's adding every time a coin gets consumed, if you will. And finally, let me go to my score here. And this is where the magic kind of is for the display on the score. So you can choose your fonts and so on, and if I go to my actor attribute, I did set the background color. When you open up the color, you can set alpha. So I've made the background, which is the box shape for the text, I've made it invisible by setting alpha to 0. And then the text appears white. Because I'm working on a black background on my scene, white reads quite well on that. And here's the formula for displaying the score. You actually need to go into what's called the expression editor, open that up, and you input everything here. So I'm going to delete all this and just go back and repeat it. So we're adding some static text to some dynamic information here. So the static part needs to be inside of quote marks, and that's the word score. So I'm going to do quote mark, score. Now I want to have a colon here, so I'm putting a colon. I also want a space bar, and then close quote marks. Now, to kind of establish this combination, there's a little syntax here which is a double period. 1, 2. Hit the period twice. And then we're going to input the value of that custom attribute. And we actually need to drill down here to input it this way. It's in the game, under attributes, in the game. It's called score. It's right at the bottom here. I double click that. And what I've done is I've entered that. So this will display the value of that attribute when it's on screen. So we'll have the word score, colon, space, and the value of the content of that attribute. So let's just hit the green check mark. Very important to click the check mark to engage that. And you can see that it's sitting there. Now I could type that in here, but I shouldn't. It won't work. You have to do it all in the expression editor. Okay? And that is how the score gets displayed. So if we go on screen, there it is up there. And when I hit play, you will see it display. So there's the word score with the colon, the space. So this 0 is actually a second element within that text box, if you will. And it's dynamic, meaning it can change as the game plays. Where this is static, this will always be the same. Okay, so as I go around, 1, and there it updated. So it's doing 3 things when I collect the coin. It's destroying the coin, it's generating a sound, and it's adding 1 to an attribute. And then we have this text box displaying the value of that attribute in a line. Okay, so that's how that all works, and that's how you can create a scorekeeper. It's fairly basic. You create a custom attribute, which is like it's a coding element that acts as a container, and that container holds data, which is the value, and in this case we're working with integers, which are numbers. So that container holds the number, but you do need to, if you want to share that with your player, you do need to put it in a display box on the screen. Okay, so that's how you create a scorekeeper. And that's the biggest takeaway today. Oh, let me talk about the fade. I actually didn't talk about the fade. All right, so the fading box. That's kind of a 2-step process. So, and then we go through the level. Okay, so let's go back to the editor and the door. Okay, so that's the door right here. So let me show you the code in the backstage area for the door. It's in 2 sections because I want it to fade and I want it to destroy. But I'll tell you right now, if I just put destroy and fade, you would never actually see the fade because of course they would happen at the same time. So I only want the destroy to happen after the fade has completed. So I've got a rule in here where it says if game score, and I have to go down and find the attribute in the game score, like that. If game score, and then I have to choose which symbol to apply is greater or equal. And then I establish 4. If I wanted to pick up only 2 coins and then have the door open, I could put a 2 in there. So this is saying after 4 coins have been destroyed, in other words, when the score is 4, do the following. And that fade is called an interpolate. We have a behavior called interpolate right here. And what are we interpolating? Interpolate means transition, basically. We're going to transition the color alpha feature, which happens to be another word for transparency. And I'll show you how I drilled down to that. I went down in here, attributes, door, color, alpha. And again, alpha is the transparency. And I set it to 0, which means it'll be completely transparent. And I said, take 2 seconds to transition from whatever it is now down to 0. So if I wanted to make that a little quicker, I could put a 1 in there, hit my tab key. So it'll now fade over 1 second. At that point, that's when I want it to disappear, because if I didn't destroy it, my green box actually would still be bumping into this invisible block, believe it or not. So I'm just going to close the fade box here. So I have a second condition, if you will, a second rule, where it says if the color of alpha equals 0, then destroy. Okay, so it's in 2 steps. One is the fade out. Second one is checking to see when the fade out is complete, which means when alpha is 0, then destroy this actor on the stage. And that's how it disappears. And then finally, the threshold, which you can't see, but it's a little box over here, a little invisible box. The threshold is what we send it to the next scene with. So on a simple collide, actor overlaps or collides with actor type player. We have a behavior called change scene, and I called that scene win. And you'll have a list of all scenes. You can also choose next scene. That would work as well. And these are for in-game ads. I just chose no ad. And you can only do ads if you actually subscribe to the program. But that's how simple it is for that. Collision, change scene, and boom, we're into the next scene. So that's how the whole thing was built. The next step I'll do is I'll do a quick demo here again. I'm just going to hide this. And we'll build one from scratch. So very quickly, demonstrating 1, 2, 3, and 4. When I hit the next one, you'll notice this will fade a little faster. There we go. And I think the 1 second is better. I drive through, and I'm about to intersect with that invisible block, and that's what triggers the move to the next scene. Boom, there it is. Okay. And in the next scene, you'll create a new scene here, and I can show you how to do that quickly and just put a text box in there. So under scenes, you just go to scene and hit the plus button to add scenes. And this is, I'll say this cautiously, you can delete a scene by highlighting it and hitting the subtract button. Okay, I think that does complete the explanation on how this file was built. So at this point, we will go in and create a new file.